Who figured out that the wandering stars weren't actually stars, but were whole entire worlds? None other than this man, Galileo. 400 years ago, he created one of the first telescopes. Here is one of Galileo's actual telescopes he made. And he was the very first human being to point one up at the night sky. When he pointed his telescope up at a star, it wasn't anything too different. Here on the left is the view of a star if you were looking through a telescope like Galileo's. You notice how a star doesn't look that different in a telescope because stars aren't magnified much by telescopes. It turns out because they're so far away. But when he pointed his telescope at a wandering star, he was amazed by what he saw. Like Venus, just looking at it in the night sky, you see a bright white star. But in a telescope, Galileo observed a disk shape. And that disk shape changed. Weeks later, he could see it like this, as a crescent. Venus has phases, a result of the fact that we're seeing it as it's going around the sun. This wasn't a star or a point of light. It was clearly an entire world. Take this wandering star, for example. Through his telescope, this one appeared fuzzy, almost as if it were 3 planets instead of 1. Here's how Galileo drew it in his journal. Was it 3 planets? What was it exactly? He couldn't really tell. But as telescopes got bigger and better, we figured it out. Those 2 things off on either side of the planet? They're rings. This is the planet Saturn. This is how it appears in a telescope that's somewhat larger and better than Galileo's. A couple hundred years after Galileo, one person had made a telescope nearly 4 feet across and 40 feet long. It required a wooden frame larger than a house just to hold it. With these bigger, better telescopes that people were making, we started discovering more surprises. The greatest surprise of all was the discovery of entirely new planets. There are only 5 planets you can see in our night sky with your bare eyes: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. So for thousands of years, these were the only wandering stars anyone knew about. But using these more powerful telescopes, a new planet was discovered, the planet Uranus, a small blue disk. And within a few decades, the planet Neptune was discovered too. Because they were so far away and so dim, these 2 new planets didn't look like much, just pale blue dots. But they were clearly planets and not stars. They had an obvious disk shape, and they don't stay put in one constellation. They wander or move, just as you'd expect of a planet orbiting the sun.